reading that beautiful scripture this morning, I can just imagine that, like me, you have heard many, many times, don't judge a book by its cover. Yes, we know that to be true, don't we? How many times have you met someone and you had a first impression, but as you got to know them, you found that you were completely wrong about what you thought from the very beginning? We certainly know that in that phrase, it is not talking about a book, but it is talking about the lives of those that we come in contact with daily. It is talking about what we see of someone using our physical eyes and not our heart. Several days ago, I was having my devotion from a passage in the upper room. I love those little books and the stories in them. And this particular day, the devotion was titled, "The Old Coin." The story fascinated me because I like old coins. Now, I have a number of them. And this man was talking about a particular coin that he had found that was a 50-cent piece. But to a collector, it was worth much more than the 50 cents. You see, that coin had two values. It had the value that the government treasury had stamped on it of 50 cents. But to the collector, like this man, it was worth much, much more. If we go back to our scripture that David just read, it is the same with God. We have a value with Him, and yet we have a different value to the people around us who see us only from the outside. You see, Samuel had been sent by God to anoint the next king of Israel. God told him to go to the household of Jesse, for I have chosen a king among his sons. So Samuel made his way to Bethlehem to find this new king and anoint him. He blessed Jesse and his sons, and he called them to the sacrifice. And when they came, he looked at Eliab, and he said to himself, "Surely this is the one, the Lord's chosen one." But God answered, "Do not look at his face or his height, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks on outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." 7 of Jesse's sons passed before the prophet Samuel. And he said to Jesse the father, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." And then he asked, "Are all of these your children? Do you have more children?" Jesse says, "My youngest is tending the sheep." Samuel says, "Send for him." Don't you know that Jesse all of a sudden thought, that is the craziest thing I've heard lately? He is just a boy. But God said to Samuel, "Anoint him." Can you imagine the clamor that caused? Here is Jesse with these fine sons that are tall and handsome, soldiers of Israel's army, and all of them have been refused. And Samuel is anointing the youngest, the little shepherd boy. Later in the story, Jesse sends food with David out to his brothers who are fighting the Philistines. But you see, there was a particular Philistine that was causing the Israelite army some real heartburn. We all know his name as Goliath. They were frightened by his challenges. But when David, God's God's anointed heard it, he said, "Who is this heathen Philistine that should challenge the armies of the living God?" Well, Eliab, the brother who had been passed by, he was really taken by David's confidence. You know, here's Eliab, the soldier, with all of his armor, and the eldest son, and here is little David. The difference is that David had been anointed to be the next king. We all know the rest of the story. David went to the brook and he picked up 5 smooth stones. He placed them in his little satchel that he had around his neck, and he prepared to go out to meet Goliath. Now, you got to get this in your mind. Here's a little boy with 5 smooth stones and a sling. No armor. He's going up against Goliath, this tall giant who has his full armor on. And David is coming out. Don't you know that Goliath thought that was the funniest thing he'd seen lately? As he stood there and he made fun of David because he's protected with his armor, his helmet, and all that he has. But you see, David got that sling ready. That stone was in it, and it hit him at a place where Goliath was not protected. Right here. It knocked him to his death. The story of David and Goliath was born that day and has been repeated millions of times in our life, down through the ages. The unlikely victor is victorious. You see, God anointed David because in God's sight, and these are the words of God, he was a man after my own heart. To those around him, though, he was a little boy, a shepherd tending his father's sheep, and the youngest of a family of handsome older brothers. The list of the unlikely chosen ones in the Bible is a very long list. The one God uses in almost every story in the Bible is an unlikely character. You see, Moses, who was a stuttering orphan with a lack of self-confidence, was chosen to lead the Israelites out of bondage. While on the other hand, in the New Testament, Saul, who would later become the Apostle Paul, an arrogant murderer of Christians, was chosen. Isn't that amazing? You see these huge contrasts of people, unlikely to be doing God's work, yet God has chosen them. 2 complete opposites. So many unlikely characters. But in the world today, we may see those who appear to have it all together, don't we? Their outward appearance says they have it all. They have a family. They live in a nice house. They have a good job. They have a nice car. But while inside there may be things going on that if we don't know them and we just see it from the outside, we may not understand. They may be fighting depression. They may be contemplating suicide. They may be battling alcoholism. Not too long ago in my Sunday school class, a man that I've known for years, one of those kinds of people that I would say has it all. He came into our Sunday school class and he said, "I have a confession." He said, "I'm a recovering alcoholic and I've fallen off the wagon." And he poured his heart out to us. And we prayed for him. And now he is back and he is sober. We did not judge him. We loved him. But on the outward appearance, none of us would have ever known this. But he trusted us enough to share the depth of his heart with us. On the other hand, we see people who we think from their outward appearance are struggling, who have little to nothing, but they have a smile on their face because there is something deep down in their heart that makes them happy. It is called the joy of the Lord.
Amen. Yes.
Just like God called Samuel to look beyond the outward appearance of little David, he is calling all of us today to look deeper than the outward appearance in loving and caring one another. You know, sometimes we see the rebellious teenager and we want to write them off and say there's no hope for them. They're so angry. Have we ever thought about why? Maybe that angry teenager is going through something at their home. Maybe their parents are contemplating divorce and they heard the arguing. Maybe that rebellious teenager has just lost a parent. I know that when I was in 9th grade, I left school for the Christmas holidays. My mother was in the hospital, but I had no idea that I would return to school after the Christmas holidays, after having buried my mother. 9th grade, 14 years old, and I will tell you that it causes teenagers to wonder about the rest of their life. She was my only parent. I could not imagine what life was going to be like after this. And I can just believe that back then I might have been angry. I might have not been the best student, but I had people around me that cared enough to give me that hug, to give me that hand up, to give me that encouragement every day. We look on the outside and we can only see what our physical eyes will let us see. But when we pray for God to touch our life, that we may be a keen listener, that we may want to know. I mean, it is so easy not to want to know. But for us to want to know, to talk with someone, not talking at them, but talking with them and finding out what is in the heart. That is the real work of God. I could not help but think of a story as the violin was being played this morning. There is an old story about a man who goes to an auction. And the auctioneer is trying to auction off an old violin, and nobody even wanted to make a bid. But a man from the audience walked up and he said, "May I play the violin?" He began to play that violin. The beautiful music of the master was being played. After that, that violin went for thousands. The touch of the master's hand. For us today, the touch of the master's hand is for those of us who can listen. It is for those of us that need to share. That is what God is calling us to do. To be real and to want to be used by Him. to be touched by the Master, so that it does not matter about our outward appearance, but it only matters what's in our heart. All of us are struggling. Whether we are the struggling Moses that does not have the confidence, or we're the arrogant Saul, we all struggle. There is no one on this earth without struggles. And sometimes we equate only the physical amount of things and money to not having struggles. It doesn't matter. We all have inward struggles. The kind of struggles that God says pour out at his altar and share with one another. And my most precious thing about coming to this church that and you've heard me say it before, that I wish every other church in the world would do, and that is to invite people, all of us, to pray around the altar so that God can move in our lives and that we are sharing with him as a congregation. And then as we go from this place to enjoy the food that has been prepared for us by our partners at St. John today, I challenge you to sit with someone you do not know. Break bread with them, but not as in appearance only, but with the heart of wanting to really know about them. So that as they share and you share, there is a common desire to pray for one another. So as we conclude the thought this morning of God looking at our heart, he knows all of us better than we know ourselves. I ask you to come down. Turn your eyes and your heart to him and say, God, use me as you would see fit. For he has something for all of us. Just as we all have struggles, we all have talents that he wants to use for his glory. Amen.